G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle. I actually was not planning on recording this video today. I have a video idea. It was going to be things I think Games Workshop could do to entice people back into the Horus Heresy. Because clearly they're having some issues selling the boxes. I didn't really just want to go down the path of other people commenting online talking about how few boxes they were selling, how many retailers had, or any of that kind of thing. Like, I'll acknowledge that that's happening, but I didn't want to just, you know, farm the algorithm in that way. It just didn't feel right to me. I know that's happening. You know that's happening. You don't need me to tell you that it's happening. So I thought instead I could, maybe talk about, okay, clearly they've had a pretty bad launch, but could they salvage the situation? If so, as a long-time Heresy player, what would it take for me to feel like it was worth investing in the game? I'm going to delay that video because I want to put a lot of effort into it, not just a sharing the screen and talking video. But I digress, because this episode is a sharing the screen and talking video. I do a lot of these because, one, it's a very easy way to make content, I won't lie about that, but it's also because I treat this more as like a podcast where, yeah, I've got something on screen because I use YouTube, but I expect most people to just be listening to this and not really watching the videos, if that makes sense. I found that a lot of videos where I did put in effort, nobody really commented on, the actual content in the video effort-wise, or a lot of the jokes just either weren't funny or they just, passed through in the background. But rambly intro aside, that's not even the real intro. The intro is, I was looking today at the Saturnine Terminators because I managed to get a high definition scan of the new Terminators, and it was useless really for making miniatures out of, because essentially it was a skin of infinite thinness. If you tried to 3D print it, it just wouldn't work. And I spent a chunk of today fixing it up, so I've now got a fully 3D printable version of the new Sat9 that I've created, which is fun for me. And then I tested it out, I printed it out, and I've got a Sat9 miniature now, so I'm holding it in my hand, and the model is huge, ginormous, unbelievably large. And I'll show you what that scale looks like in a minute. Not my particular one, but it looks identical, so it doesn't really matter because it's a direct 3D scan of the legitimate model, which goes to show how far technology has moved, but, well, I digress. And it got me thinking, because seeing this 3D scan of all the parts, I realised just how many parts made up this model. And I've previously talked about the bloat in sprues, and that's where this video starts today. Here is the Rhino sprue from Legions Imperialis. Legions Imperialis to me is just symptomatic of we're making a high detail for a game where you don't see the detail, and it becomes tedious because of it. Where I know a lot of people who have never finished Legions Imperialis armies that they started because they just went, you know what, it's just too much effort, I can't be stuffed. And, look at this. This is Rhino tanks, and look how many parts there are. For just a simple tank, you got a hull center, you got a hull floor, you got, well, actually, that's more than the Rogel Dawn tank in 40k, but that's, you got 2 hull sides, that's 4 parts, then you got a dozer blade, 5, then 4 exhausts, you're up to 9 parts, then a minimum of 2 hatches on top, that takes you to at least 11 parts, and that's without including the weapons. If you got additional like combi bolter commander or something like that, you could be looking at 12 parts. For a tank that is removed literally with a dustpan and shovel, like these things are removed faster than, well, yeah. So it got me thinking, right? If this is tedious, like what else is tedious out there? And of course, Necron Flayed ones, another great example of just like tedium. Because you look at these kits, especially like this Necron one, and this is, I don't know about how many of you build your miniatures, but when I build my miniatures, I do it in big batches, and I like to cut all the parts off, and then I clean them up. I clean all the mold lines, I go through, I use a scalpel, use sandpaper, use whatever I need to, clean my miniatures all up, and then I sort them out into piles. Legs pile, arms pile, weapons pile, heads pile, chest pile, etc. And I have a little production line that gets going once I've got everything finished, I just, doesn't matter what order I clean the parts in, they just all get separated into those piles. It's very easy for me to move on and, with the construction phase. But when I look at this or any of the newer sort of kits, you get lost in it. If I put these parts down a pile and walked away and came back, I'd have to pick up each leg individually and go, okay, I think, yeah, that's a right leg. This is a left leg. Now, do these two go together? No. All right. So there's another leg that does. And I have to sit there and match them up. Because these sprues are laid out by an absolute madman. They're not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across the top, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 across the next row, 11, 12, 13 across the next row. The numbers are all over the place. And you feel like you're being waterboarded every time you try and find something. Because the human mind, most people are very analytical. In the West, we read left to right, top to bottom. In Asia, it's typically right to left, but going right, then down, then across, then down, then across, then down. And so I think that, we've been ordered, essentially as a species, to look for patterns in certain ways. And when you get these sprues, I don't know how many of you have sat there. I know I have, so again, in comments, let me know. But you sit there and you're just going, all right, part number 9. Where's part number 9? Where's part number 9? Where's part number 9? And you're looking all over it. You're like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, no. Okay, it jumps to part 15, 14 below that. Oh, yeah, across 12, 10. And then you might skim completely over the number you're looking for, and it's just staring at you. It's right there, right in front of your face in the open, and then you miss it. Because everything is just blending into a blur because the parts are just laid out however is easiest to reduce the mold, not however is easiest for the person who has to assemble it. And that's really, really confusing, isn't it? So, to keep going with this theme, this is the Legions Imperialis sprue. Again, I'll pick on Legions Imperialis just twice more, I promise. Just twice more. This is for the Dreadnoughts and Rapiers and Tarantula sprue. So, there is a bit of variety in here in units. But of course, the units themselves don't have a heap going on. They're relatively simple models when you look at them, right? Like, how much can really be happening with them? And then you, of course, see the sprue itself and you go, oh, God, no. Like, each rapier carriage is, you got 2 sides of it, then you got some sort of weapons that go in the middle of the rapier carriage, and they look like they're mostly in the one spot, but then, like, infantry to crew it are off in another. And then, like, tarantula parts are also next to that, and dreadnoughts interspersed throughout, and just, it's all over the place, isn't it? Like, again, you can't just cleanly go, okay, this is this, and easily separate them out. You start looking at it and you go, okay, it's definitely easier than Necron Flayed ones, but this is not a great sprue regardless. And then if you go into something like the Katos Tank, you think this is a single tank. Really? There's 2 on the sprue. It's just mirror image, split across the middle of the screen from left to right. And look at how many parts there are. You've got, hull floor, hull top, each side. You've got the turret. You've got the dozer blade assembly. You've got the ram to hold the dozer blade. You've got the rear of the tank itself. You've got the lower front half of the tank. That's 10 parts. Then you got 4 exhausts, some sort of ice sensor sight things. No, weapons. Those are weapons. I'm thinking these things on the left here. Those are like weapon sprues, and there's easily 30 parts in a tank that, again, is removed with a dustpan and brush. And you can legitimately build an entire army of just this one vehicle. Who wants to assemble 30 parts on a vehicle at that scale over and over and over again? Because games of Legion Imperialis, you're taking more than one tank. The armies they showcase. I mean, even if you want to build just what's in the contents of this one box, you're still looking at including 4 of these things. That's 120 parts. 120 parts for 4 vehicles. That's absurd to me. I mean, if we were to go off the starter set for Legions Imperialis as an indicator of scale of a game system, think about that for a second. you'd probably be looking at, for a tank force, somewhere around the 4 Kratos, probably half a dozen Predators, a couple of Sikaran battle tanks, and then all of those infantry all over again. And that's just for a Marine army of this size. And this is considered a small army for the game system. So that's how many hundreds of parts between like the Kratos tanks and the Predators and the Sikaran battle tanks. Between those kits, you're probably approaching 500 parts to assemble. 500 parts in this game system? Like, you're never going to see the detail? I don't know. I just think that's silly. And so, anyway, the genesis of this episode, though, was I was looking here over at a Taylor Painters, who have done a wonderful article up on July 12th, 2025. So shout out to them, because I'm going to be showing off stuff from in here in their review of the box set. And in this review, you know, you're looking at this set, the Sat9 set, and you look at these miniatures and you think, you know, there can't really be that many parts, right? Because this is essentially a starter set. This is an intro into this game system. You know, 40K's Marines, they seem to come in like, you know, 4 or 5 pieces each at most. Quite easy to assemble, right? Even the bigger stuff like the Terminators aren't that many parts. Well, you'd be wrong. So in here we get some sort of scale perspective. This in particular is quite telling. Just the size of the new miniatures is astounding. These Sat9, apart from proportionally being the worst proportioned models in the Games Workshop range, and I know people have been saying, oh, Terminators have never been anatomically right for decades. Yeah, why does it matter now? I get what you're saying, but it's a bit of a dumb argument when you consider that, like, they were close enough that you could suspend your disbelief with a Terminator. You'll get it and you go, okay, the head's a bit low on the shoulders, but otherwise, proportionally, it can probably work. But when you look at the, you know, and you knew that it was pushing it on Terminators because it has come up in conversation, they're anatomically not great. You look at this Sat9 thing and you're like, well, Jesus. The thigh gap on that, it's got this incredibly long abdomen and then these stumpy little legs. The only thing that could make sense is if this is some sort of proto-dreadnought. Like, it's a Marine who's been all messed up in battle, lost all his limbs, and he's been put in this. In which case, you're like, well, why do dreadnoughts exist if this can also exist? But I digress. And of course, when you look at this model, it doesn't look that complicated. Well, you'd be wrong. It's incredibly complicated. This is the sprue for 2. 2. Have a look at that. So split it straight again, transverse, straight across the middle, left to right. There are, 58 parts. 58 parts for a single one of these Terminators. Now, I would be somewhat okay with this if it was designed for maximum convertibility and posability. It's not really, because yes, it uses things like ball joints, but as you can see on the sprues here, right down here, there's little tabs on these joints. Little tabs in different locations on these sockets. These parts are really only designed to have a very limited range of motion. And if you do exceed that range of motion, they'll often clash or interfere with other parts that you try to attach later on. And I saw this when I turned these wireframes today into solid objects and started just manipulating them in the computer. And I went, oh, wow, these things are, you know, they're intersecting with one another. This is not good, because it really limited what you could do with the posing. Now, if you cut off all those little tabs, yes, you can get some more posability out of these. But the fact of the matter is, that is an awful lot of parts for something that they really just seem to intend for you to only build in one particular way. And it's like, well, if you only want me to build in one particular way, could you not have found a better way to sculpt this so that all of this detail could have just been the Monopose miniature that you seem to think it should be? Because this is an absurd amount of parts for a miniature. At 58 parts, even granted that you're not going to use all of them because, well, you've got at least 2 optional weapons in there, right? Because You're either going to take the plasma weapon, or you're going to take the disintegrator, or you're going to take the power fist. The power fist has open fingers and it's got closed fingers. But even the fingers, you can see, you get 3 fingers that are open, 3 that are closed, and then you have to pick the other matching open closed fingers from elsewhere on the sprue to attach to that power fist. They couldn't give you 5 fingers. That's too much to mold. I'm telling you, as someone who worked in plastic for 5 years, it's not that hard to make a mold for it. It just makes the mold more complicated to design, and it could be more expensive if you add things like moving parts to the die, like cores and such. But, well, they came up with this convoluted design in the first place, so that's on them. Now, I just sit here and I'm just like, wow, even the back of it, the back of the miniature have 2 pieces. These are relatively flat, by the way, on the finished model, if you see them. I'm surprised they couldn't mold that as a single piece. Like, shocked that they couldn't mold that as a single piece. It's just total insanity to actually see these models and just how many parts went into it. Because who wants to, just think about that for a moment. There are 6 Sat9 in this box set. So to make those 6 Sat9 miniatures at 58 parts each, that is 352 parts, give or take. Because, I probably got my count wrong along the way somewhere. Think about that. Over 350 parts to make 6 models. And these are just infantry models. Tough infantry, but infantry models in this box set. And then the Ptor. Now, I don't think Sat9 Prators should be a thing because it makes no sense. They'd be so ungainly. They could never swing their ridiculous Warcraft melee weapons that look terrible at anyone. But I know some people out there really like the look of these things. I can't understand it, but I'm not going to judge it much. But look at this, 78 parts. This is a single character model. 78 parts. Now you could probably knock 4 or 5 of those off because, well, you don't need 2 sets of loincloths. You're going to use either one with leather straps, part number 29, or you use part number 28 with the regular loincloth. And you're not going to use all 4 of the shoulder pads on the front, right? You're going to use 24 and 26, or you're going to use... Sorry, you're going to use 26 and 28. Wait, what number are these? Is that 26, that 24? And that 27, that 25? Again, it's the convoluted numbering methodology. I'm guessing because the 27 sticks into this one, that's 27. See the confusion? And I've been building models for over 30 years. Anyway, you're not going to use all the fists. You're not going to use all the shoulder pads. You're not going to use the axe and the hammer at the same time, most likely. So there's a few parts you can probably say, yeah, probably a half a dozen of those are not going to be used. But it's 78 parts for this model, including a stupid tactical rock. That's an awful, awful lot of parts, isn't it? Isn't it? And then we go further. This is one of the 3... Thank you, Tale of Painters, as well, for the excellent sprue images. You did a great job. This is the Sat9 Dreadnought. Have a look at the toes. Now, each one of these sprues is around 50 to 60 parts. I think there's 60 parts, 58 parts, something like that on the Sprue 2 of 3. And then there's another, it says 34. Or 35, 37, can't even pick all the numbers out. 40, there goes, at least 40 parts. But you get a lot of duplicates, like 7, 7, 7, 7, 17, 17, 17, 17, 17. Like, you get a lot of the same part on these sprues. So the real number is somewhere north of 40, somewhere north of 60, and somewhere north of 48. I say somewhere north of 48, 49, oh no, 52. 52 is the highest number I can now see. Again, it's like a Where's Wally, Where's Waldo, wherever you're from has a different name, where you're like trying to pick out the numbers. But have a look how many of these are just the same number toe. 43, 43, 42, 42, 43, 43, 36, 35. I sound like someone who's calling out the Tatslotto numbers. There are 30 parts just to make the feet and toes for this Dreadnought. 30 parts for its toes. an upper and a lower toe and a little armor plate that like segments over the top. What the hell? 30 parts for toes. And then the torso is, again, this same problem all over again, especially because you get just multiple really, really similar yet subtly different center torsos. It's like, what, this couldn't have been done maybe by just having one torso and then a little part you could glue on like a gubbin? Apparently not. And it culminates in just this massive level of bloat for a miniature, which basically has two loadouts. Because you can change the chest gun slightly. It's just, do you want the plasma weapons and the disintegrator, or do you want the plasma weapons and the disintegrator? All these parts. And someone in the comments could be like, oh, but the detail in the finished model. Show me something that size with that kind of detail. Okay, Cerassus Night Lancer. 4 sprues. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it. It has individual toes, but they managed to sculpt the top and the bottom as one piece, not two pieces. This thing even has separate hydraulics to go on its toes around its legs, you know, give it all that detail. And yet somehow this model, which is twice the size, and has, again, as much, if not more, posability, somehow this model here, I think, has just as much detail as the Sat9 Dreadnought. It's just the Sat9 Dreadnought has superfluous detail. Bunch of extra parts that you glue together in places you will not see, and a whole bunch of extra effort. Like, look, all these little hydraulics pistons that are sitting here underneath the shins that are actuating this ring around the leg to move the toe. Fantastic, right? But when you look over here at this same design, look at all those toes. Just look at them all. It's an obscene amount of detail for this miniature. Because when you look at the finished miniature, you go, that's a lot of big flat surfaces. But it's because so many like little pieces that are underneath those flat surfaces. Like, did it need these little cutouts? Do they really add to the model that if you took them away, you'd be like, oh, damn, I really miss those. Now, without those, this model doesn't feel complete. I don't think a person would think that way. You know, if you took away these little extra armor plates over the top of each of these toes, would that matter to you? No, I don't think to the average person it would, having an upper and a lower toe. It didn't need them on the Leviathan. Why does it need them here? It's superfluous detail, and I can't help but think this is done entirely to convince people that you're buying a premium product because it has a high parts count. But I hate to break to you, high parts count does not necessarily equate to well-designed premium products. It just means that there are a lot of parts. That's it. It can be a sign of something's high quality, but if you buy scale miniatures kits, they come with things like aluminium barrels, and the reason they come with those is because they're turned, they're beautifully straight, accurate, and have no mold lines because they're being made in a machine, turned out of aluminium or brass. These things have big mold lines and they run through all the little coils and stuff, and it's a pain in the butt to put together. And we go on. Even that rather simplistic Mark II Praetor that again is Monopose junk. And I'll die on that hill. I don't feel that characters should be Monopose. Characters are supposed to be convertible miniatures. They're supposed to bring life to your army. They're supposed to be unique, something that you customize and you make your own. If you're going to give me a model which is super Monopose that these characters are, where there is no other way to build them without, you know, removing wholesale parts from it, like getting rid of all of the cloak, removing both the shoulder pads, cutting away all these little locating pins on it, you're going to make it pretty much impossible for anyone who hasn't got a couple years experience to convert decently. Make it as one piece. You know, just go that way if that's what you want. But you've still delivered a model here with, what, 31 parts it looks like? For a Monopose miniature. It's an absurd amount of parts. The Mark IIs, well, these suffer from the same problems as the Mark III and Mark VI kits that have come before, in that all these annoying separate legs and separate torsos and all that, and you got to figure out which ones belong with which, because you see part 11 and part 2 look really similar, but you can see part 2, the butt plate on the back there is ever so slightly more around to the right hand side, so each one of them only has a very specific set of legs that fit it. Okay, of course you got that. So all that's much for muchness. But then I get to the Arachne autocannon sprues. And you look at this thing and you, okay, it looks like it's only got like 10 parts. But then you realize that there's 4 to 8 of every single part on there. And you go, okay, so there's about 30 parts on that sprue. There's a good 40 odd 50 parts at least on this sprue. Because again, there's a lot of sets of four double ups, 4 cannons. They're all the same number. These 4 drums for the ends of the cannons, they're all the same number. It's a gun turret. It's 4 pencils glued to a tennis ball. How complicated could you make it? Like, yes, plastic injection molding has its limitations, but as a person who has designed parts, many parts for industrial scale 3D molded processes, the limitation here is in the design of the sprue, not the technology of the molds. It's just down to how much you want to invest in the mold if you want to make it with this much detail but in less parts, or remove some detail and make it in less parts. It's trying to have the best of both worlds, keeping the mold cheap and having a lot of superfluous detail as a selling point. And yeah, it blows my mind. And I thought another great comparison point, not just the Cerastus Night Lancer, is this. This is the Hobby Boss 1-72 German 80 centimeter railway gun. This model is huge for a start. Even at 1-72, this thing's like a meter long. It's ridiculous. Its length is in fact, it's 3.5 feet long. It's 8 inches wide, 210 millimeters wide. It has 1,767 pieces. And it has 33 sprues, I think it is. Yeah, 33 sprues. And it's $229. It's half the Australian price. Not even half. It's less than half. It's the third-party independent store retailer 20% off discounted price of the Sat9 box for this. And the parts are laid out logically. Look at these sprues. Once you've found a part, all of the parts of that same type are right next to each other in a long straight line. And the numbers typically go number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Like, really easy to read. They don't waterboard you with it. And once you find a part, you're like, great, all right, all of that part that I need, let's cut them all out now. Everyone who's ever done German tanks knows all the road wheels, right? You cut all the wheels off the sprues and clean them all up. It takes ages because there's a bajillion of them, And this is the thing, like, I expect this level of detail where it's giving me balustrades and railings and all this kind of stuff in my sprues when I'm building an 80 centimeter railway gun, which is a meter long and, it's gigantic. Look at this thing. This is covered in an obscene amount of detail in the best possible way. But this here has about as many parts as the Sat9 box, and it's just unbelievable. And yet, how cheap is it comparatively? Just saying, like, there's a lot going on here. And when you compare what's going on with this box set, I struggle to comprehend why a introductory box, which clearly is trying to use these new miniatures as a focal point, as a selling point of the edition, has such an obscenely high parts count all over the place. It is fun to build models. I mean, we wouldn't do it if it wasn't. But there's a point where fun transcends into tedium, okay? And it becomes tedium at about the point where I need 60 parts to build a single Terminator. I'd say around 20 parts is pretty healthy for something of the complexity of one of these Sat9 Terminators. And I think to really ram home the point, an very similar sized miniature with a, surprisingly comparable amount of detail. You don't think it at first, but when you see behind the Centurions and you see the whole power armored Marine is actually in the back of this thing, and you can see all the, on the back side of it, the actual Marine that is using this warsuit. This is probably no one's favorite miniatures, but this is a very interesting example because here you have a set of miniatures which are very similar to the Sat9. Similar size bases, similar height. They're a little bit shorter. They also mount a variety of heavy weapons, and there is a similar amount of parts on the Sprew. 59, 60 parts on the Sprew. Okay, in fact, up to here we've got 66 parts. Cool. But in this kit, we don't have one Power Fist, one Heavy Disintegrator, and one Plasma whatever thrower. What we've got is we have 2 las cannons, 2 melter guns, 2 flamers, 2 heavy bolters, 2 graviton cannons, and 2 power fists for every one of these, as well as 2 siege drills. We have chest-mounted bolt guns, we have chest-mounted rocket launchers. So that's how many different weapons options comparatively? Like, what, 6 times the amount of weaponry? So you go, okay, at least if, and you can see sort of some of the detail in the back of the Sprew I was talking about, like you can see the power armored Marine slotted into the rear harness. So these have a surprising amount of detail, even if they're not the greatest looking miniatures, So you can have this insane amount of parts if the kit is doing a lot with them, okay? But the problem with the Sat9 is they break down. The upper arm is one part, the ball joint below it is another part, then the weapon is 2 or 3 parts. And it's so easy to see how quickly they over bloated the amount of parts in the miniature. Because if it was me, I would have just made the upper arm and the elbow one piece with a ball joint at each end. Why can't you do that? It's easily moldable, and it would have been exactly the same amount of posability. I can't for the life of me think why they didn't. The feet, there's a front toe and a rear toe on the Sat9 Terminators. And that front toe and that rear toe means that you've got 2 parts there. You've then got the lower shin, which has obviously got front and back sides. You've got a knee ball joint, then you have an upper thigh above that, which is multiple parts. Then you have another ball joint that sockets into that. And then those 2 ball joints socket into the hips. Then you've got the torso. The torso has a front torso. It has an upper torso. It has a 2-part rear torso. Then you've got the head that goes in there. Then a surrounding ring around the head. Then you've got the little vent device that goes up on top. Then you have the 2 shoulder pads at each side. Then you've got the ball joint sockets in the upper torso. Then you have the lower arms coming off of that. Like, holy crap, the amount of parts. Why? Why so many parts? It's obscene. And for what? Does this Sat9 Terminator really look that much better than the Indominus Terminator to the right of it to justify this parts count? Like, I know I belabor the point this episode, but I really want to ram it home. It's not hobbyist friendly. It's not gamer friendly. It's not new starter friendly. The only thing that I can pick up from this that I think it is that it is trying to justify the sheer amount of parts as equaling a high quality premium product. Like, hey, look how many hundreds of parts you get. That's how you know this is good. Because I don't sit there looking at this going, yes, if this didn't have these different ball joints and, multiple parts to the upper arms, I don't know how I could have lived with myself. This just Terminator would have paled in comparison to everything that had come before. For decades, we got away with Terminators with 1 part for their entire arm, but now, thankfully, I can have 5, 6 parts for each arm on a Terminator. And finally, my life is complete. It's obscene. Again, thank you, Taylor Painters, for your wonderful breakdown of the miniatures. It's very, very helpful. These things are absurd. It's bigger than Obliterator. It's monstrous. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Please comment below if you are like me and your brain just starts to melt the minute you start trying to read through new Games Workshop sprues. Comment below if you're like me and you sit there going, why are there so many damn parts that were so close to being the same and yet slightly different so they don't go together on a miniature? Like on the Mark II Power Armor where the torso has that butt plate that's just ever so slightly more round on the next one. So, it's only got one matching set of legs and they only go on that one torso. I find that really annoying. Comment below if you sit there going, damn it, the amount of times I sit there trying to find the number on the sprue and it just vanishes and I can't find it. Let me know. Also, if you cut all those parts out, like arms or legs and that kind of thing, and you sit there for 40 minutes trying to figure out what arm goes with what leg, comment below. The point I'm trying to get at is I want your feedback. Am I completely blowing this out of proportion, or is this just the absurd amount of stuff that I think it is? Anyway, that's it for me. I'm Mac with the Outer Circle. This is your daily rant of some kind, I guess. I don't know. But when I come back to you next, it's going to be where I think 3.0 should be going from here. And really, this is kind of ending my 3.0 content. After that video, I don't intend to talk about it anymore. For the same reason I'm not buying the Libra books and talking about those, not even pirating them and talking about those. I have no interest in talking about a game system that does not appeal to me. I want to share my thoughts on what I think could be done to try and remedy the situation, and that's going to be where I dust my hands of the situation and go, you know what? Community, it's been fun. You have had it. I'm just going to work on my own stuff for now. See you later.